The crystal goblet hovered in the air, ruby liquid catching the restaurant's honeyed glow. Victor Langford's mouth was a breath away from the rim when a scream split the hush. "Stop! That's poisoned!" A soaked street kid burst through the mahogany doors like lightning. Guards leapt, the priceless glass shattered on Italian tile, wine radiating like blood. In the upheaval, Victor caught something in the boy's eyes. Not delirium, but certainty. The sharp, exact look of a mind that had built empires on data, not guesses. Rain-heavy sneakers skidded across polished marble. Security converged as the crystal detonated against stone, red streaking across white like a crime scene. Flashbulbs flared, diners gasped, and yet Victor noticed the kid's composure. A battered notebook hugged his chest. His wrist showed the faint tan line where a once expensive watch had lived. He crouched, studying color and scent with clinical focus. How did a homeless 20-something catch what trained professionals missed? The answer, Victor sensed, would tie both their futures into a single volatile fuse. The kid's notebook was weathered, edges softened by storms and use. His hands, scarred but steady, flipped pages lined with dense notation. He moved like someone who'd spent nights in fluorescent labs, not under freeway roar. He eyed the spill's hue, noted viscosity, whispered to himself about volatile compounds. Victor felt a stir of déjà vu, that precise, patient gaze, measuring the world molecule by molecule. Whoever this young man was, he wasn't guessing. He was observing, deducing, committing to an answer before the evidence cooled. 3 months earlier, Malik Johnson's life wore different clothes, but fate loves a controlled burn. The overpass arced above like poured concrete sky, semis rumbling overhead. In this neglected pocket of downtown, Malik assembled something uncanny from scraps. He built a life-sized hypothesis. He called it making do. Others might call it genius with calluses. The city ignored him until it needed him, but Malik had learned to stop asking for permission. He asked questions, ran tests, and let results argue for him. Brown glass rescued from university dumpsters. Pocket stove flames coaxed from compressed fuel canisters. pH strips bartered for tutoring sessions with grad students who never asked more than necessary. The lab looked improvised. Plastic sheets deflecting weather, battery LEDs pooling cold light, but every tool had a job. Each station was arranged with the economy of someone who understood that knowledge is leverage, and leverage demands instruments. Here, under concrete thunder, Malik had carved a sanctuary where chemistry could keep people alive another day. "Ice, hydrogen sulfides running hot," Malik murmured, checking a cloudy vial collected from a public spigot uptown. Elders and parents brought samples from across the grid. He logged sources, temperatures, times. Mrs. Carter hovered, nerves knotted in her hands. "This one's okay," he told her, "but skip the fountain on 5th, biofilm and bacteria." She pressed a wrinkled dollar into his palm. "You spared my grandson last week." He tried to return it. "Keep it. Truth should be free." His stomach, traitorous, growled anyway. Hunger blurs calendars. Yesterday, maybe the day before, whatever meal counted had lost its timestamp. Malik pulled his most precious artifact from the notebook's inner sleeve, a photograph laminated against the weather. 3 lab coats, arms slung like promises. His father, Dr. Leonard Johnson. His mother, Dr. Elise Johnson. Between them, a younger Malik grinning beneath a junior chemist badge. "Dad always said knowledge is the one thing they can't steal," he whispered to the photo, the way some people whisper prayers, hoping molecules listen. The memory struck like it always did, clean and cruel. The midnight call. A lab explosion, they said. A gas leak, they said. His father, who taught him to hear harmonies in reaction mechanisms, collapsed into headlines about failures and violations. Then, the legal tinderbox. Insurance fights, endless forms, blame shuffled like a deck. His mother's world narrowed to pill schedules and therapy calendars. Savings dissolved. House gone. Cars repossessed. Malik's future pawned to finance mere survival. Grief became a background frequency, as steady as freeway noise. His hands shook less from November wind than from the caged animal anger that paced his ribs. 3 years since he'd been Malik Johnson, scholarship kid with a golden ticket to MIT. Now he blended into brick and shadow, counting coins for calories. But surrender wasn't coded in him. Mornings, he scavenged university cast-offs before dawn. Broken glassware could be cleaned, cracked clamps shimmed, expired reagents cataloged for secondary reactions. Most students looked away. A few slipped textbooks, like quiet endorsements passing under locked doors. Your methodology is unexpected, Professor Kim had said last month, weighing Malik's handwritten water survey. Have you thought about formal enrollment? The question stung, sweet and bitter. Malik nodded, pocketing the praise without revealing that an MIT acceptance letter slept in his notebook, inked, before the floor caved in. He kept it near the photo, a relic of a forked timeline. Ambition on hold isn't ambition dead. Winter crept closer, glazing mornings with frost and turning concrete to an ice pack beneath his thin sleeping bag. Some folks drifted south when the cold came. Malik stayed tethered. His mother was 2 bus transfers away, counting on his visits when he could scrape fare. And he was circling a theory dangerous enough to heat him from the inside out. The official report didn't add. Gas concentrations mismatched equipment specs. Safety protocols supposedly skipped. Protocols his father treated like oxygen made no sense. And then the research logs vanished after the blast, sown to the wind. Accident? The numbers argued murderer with stubborn clarity. Someday, with resources and a credentialed signature line, he'd dig properly. Until then, he survived like a disciplined experiment. One test, one kindness, one solved problem at a time. Dr. Johnson hadn't raised a complainer. He'd raised a scientist, and scientists don't stop because it's dark. Scholarship deadlines loomed next month. Malik drafted essays under street lamps, a story told without pleading. Grades were dusty, knowledge was current. Grad students promised letters about the lab under the bridge. Maybe gatekeepers would see past the grit. Maybe. First, he needed warmth, calories, and quiet enough to polish sentences until they gleamed. He didn't know destiny had already circled a date on the calendar. That Tuesday would flip his trajectory like a coin. The storm that night hammered the skyline, turning November breath to knives. Malik tucked under a bookstore's shallow awning, watching rivers sluice off awnings along the restaurant strip. He didn't belong here. This district was for people whose names sat on embossed cardstock. Every doorway was locked or watched. Through rain-streaked glass, he clocked a man dining alone near a corner banquette. Silver hair. Presence that bent the room without raising a voice. Even from outside, Malik read the tension in the man's posture, the steel in his jaw while he argued into his phone. Victor Langford, though Malik didn't know it yet, pressed the device closer, fingers whitening against linen. "Try your hostile play," Victor said, words faint through glass. "I'll torch the company before I let you monetize Leonard's research." Leonard, the name stung. The call snapped off. Victor sagged a fraction, 66 years, settling across his shoulders like plated armor. A waiter approached. Malik had studied people long enough to read microtells like footnotes. This server moved wrong, too staged, too cautious. Hands trembled around a bottle that didn't match the seller's cadence. No dust bloom, room temp glass. The label angled to obscure the vintage. Everything about it whispered counterfeit. Then the HVAC hiccuped, wind shouldering scent through vents. Something bitter, almond lean, ghosted across Malik's trained senses. Potassium cyanide. His father had taught him that smell, rare, genetic, faint, during a Saturday lesson over hooded glass. "Your nose notices what instruments sometimes miss," Leonard had said, "but if you smell bitter almonds where they don't belong, treat time like an enemy." The waiter reached Victor's table, pouring with theatrical flourish. Victor nodded, attention still lashed to corporate trench warfare. Malik's pulse went arrhythmic. Maybe it was degreaser from the kitchen, maybe paranoia, maybe pattern making out of rain and fear, but the algebra screamed danger. Victor lifted the glass. Time dilated. Every lesson hardened into imperative. Scent concentration, server anxiety, color skew just a hair left of normal, the meniscus wrong. Someone was about to murder a man while the city applauded the plating. Getting involved risked exposure, questions, a paper trail he couldn't afford. But responsibility is an element, not an opinion. If you can stop harm, you do. His father's mantra rang like lab glass. Malik moved. He sprinted, shoes skidding, choosing trouble over silence, duty over safety. He hit the door at full tilt, stormwater turning tile to ice. The maitre d' lifted a hand. "Sir, you can't." Malik didn't break. Victor's glass had already tipped. The server edged back, satisfied. "Stop!" Malik's shout cleaved the dining room's soft loud like an alarm bell. "It's poison." Conversations died mid-syllable. The goblet halted inches from Victor's mouth. Red trembled against crystal. For one shared heartbeat, the building held breath. Then reality shattered. The part everyone remembers, security flooding in, radios hissing, an evening curdling to chaos. The thunderhead outside cracked open, drumming the windows, while the dining room convulsed. Radios barked. Diners stood, scraping chairs, craning phones. 2 guards closed on Malik like precision tools. But Victor raised a palm, voice cutting through the clamor. "Hold!" Something in the kid's tone, clean, clinical, had pinned him. The maitre d' sputtered about decorum and trespass. Malik, drenched, breathing hard, never broke eye line with the trembling goblet. "Please," he said, steadier now. "Don't taste it. We can test. We can know." The lead guard hesitated, hung between policy and command. Victor's instincts, honed in boardrooms and clean rooms, tilted toward evidence. "We verify," he said, setting the glass down gingerly. A server hustled for a sealable bag. Another fetched the manager. The suspect waiter, eyes skittering, shifted his weight, gaze pinging kitchen then exit. Malik's notebook slid free. Plastic sleeves beaded with rain. He opened to diagrams, buffers, cyanide antidote pathways, ink tight as surgical stitches. "Smell was faint," he said. "Color a shade off. Don't add air." "Oh, sir, this is absurd," the waiter stammered, attempting a smile that never reached his eyes. "The bottle is from our private cellar." Malik's gaze flicked to the label. "Angle hides the ear," he said. "No dust. Condensation reads room temp, not cellar cool. Cork lacks imprinting." Victor studied the man, catching the micro-flinch. "In pharmacology, tells aren't metaphors, they're data." "Bag it," Victor said. "Chain of custody." The maitre d' swallowed, nodded to staff. Somewhere near the bar, a diner whispered, "Is that the Langford?" Security rebalanced, one guard shadowing Malik without touching him, the other watching the exit. "Who are you?" the lead asked, less hostile, more curious. "Someone who knows what cyanide does in acidic media," Malik said, breath finally smoothing. He pointed at the spill. "Stone is porous. Volatilization profiles matter." The dining room's noise flattened to a listening hush. Victor's phone vibrated. He ignored it. The waiter inched backward. "Sir, please, I should check the kitchen." "You'll stay," Victor said mildly. It sounded like a statute. The manager arrived with latex gloves and an evidence pouch, hands shaking despite practiced hospitality. "Seal the glass. Bring a second container for the bottle," Victor instructed, slipping into the cadence he used at crisis audits. Malik's eyes tracked workflows, approving or correcting with subtle nods. Someone at a back table muttered about overreaction. Someone else muttered about lawsuits. The waiter's mouth went dry. He risked another step toward the service door. The nearest guard shifted, posture sliding from concierge to wall. "Sir, Mr. Langford," the waiter tried, voice going papery. "If we delay service—" "We're past service," Victor said. "We're doing science." He angled a look at Malik. "Method?" Malik swallowed, then delivered like he belonged behind a podium. "Collect headspace without agitating. Test with picrate paper or Koenig reaction if you have the kit. If not, police talks. Worst case, ER can confirm in under an hour." The manager blinked at the vocabulary, like it was a second language. Victor nodded once. "Call the police." The word police changed the weather. The waiter's mask cracked. He bolted, an adrenaline geometry sprinting for the kitchen. He made it maybe 12 feet before the second guard wrapped him mid-torso and planted him neatly, painlessly, on tile. Cutlery clattered. A woman yelped. The guard murmured something about lawyers and breathing. The waiter cursed, wriggled, stilled. Malik felt his own knees soften in aftershock. He clutched the notebook harder, grounding himself in paper and ink, in lines his father once traced with patient hands. Sirens ghosted the storm, then grew teeth. Blue-red light strobed across the rain-bruised windows. Victor's jaw unclenched. Crisis training slid fully into place. He offered Malik a chair. The kid declined on instinct, then sank, because biology doesn't care about pride. Name? Victor asked, softer. Malik, he said, voice roughened. Malik Johnson. The guards exchanged a look, recognition flickering at the surname and the scientist seated before them. Victor filed the data point away, important later, dangerous now. He focused on process, evidence, statements, truth. Uniforms wound through linen and silver, like floodwater through reeds. A detective in a dark suit, badge-clipped, eyes sharp, took the scene in one long, practiced scan. Detective Alejandra Alvarez, she said, voice even. Who's calling it poison? Heads tilted toward Malik. He stood, took a careful breath, and explained. Scent, temperature, label trickery, meniscus and hue. The waiter's autonomic tells. No theatrics, just sequence. Alvarez listened without interrupting, then gestured to a tech. Bag and tag. Field test for cyanide. Then we decide the next hour. The tech worked briskly. Swabs, vials, a portable spectro kit that wasn't ideal but beat superstition. Malik narrated suggestions, never touching the chain, only mapping risk. Alvarez kept glancing between him and Victor, assembling a mosaic, drenched kid with a scholar's cadence, titan of pharma playing second chair. The waiter, Caleb Morse, per ID, sat cuffed, sweat stippling his temple despite the AC. I want a lawyer, he muttered. You'll want several, Alvarez said dryly. The portable kit strip shifted color. The tech looked up, jaw set. Prelim positive for cyanide, the tech said. The room inhaled. Cameras, because there are always cameras, caught wide-eyed diners, gloved hands, the tiny chemistry of consequence. Alvarez's tone didn't change. We'll confirm at the lab. She turned to Victor. Mr. Langford, you okay? He nodded once. Thanks to him, he said, tipping his chin toward Malik. The compliment landed and slid off. Malik stared at the table grain, rain still threading from his jacket hem. Relief felt indistinguishable from exhaustion when you'd been braced for disaster too long. A uniform read, Morse his rights. The man's composure thinned into wine. It wasn't supposed to. He bit it off, eyes darting. Alvarez's eyebrow arced. Finish sentences carefully, she said. They get heavy. She directed a tech to the kitchen, asked for bottle provenance, cellar logs, staff rosters. Malik rubbed his scalp, breath hitching in delayed tremors. Victor crouched to eye level. You okay, son? Malik's laugh was a scratch of flint. Define okay. Victor smiled without mirth. Alive, for starters. Temporarily, Malik said, then softened. Thanks. The manager, pale and sweating, handed over inventory printouts that would later tell their own story. No such bottle logged, delivery records off by a case. A backdoor camera mysteriously down for maintenance. Alvarez tucked the stack beneath her arm like a thin shield. Mr. Morse, she said, you didn't act alone. Silence answered, huge and childish. She pivoted to Malik. You smelled it outside? HVAC's crossflow carried it into the vestibule, he said. Flux would be higher by the table. Alvarez nodded, impressed, despite herself. Oh, walk me through your background, she said, tone neutral. Malik's gaze clouded, private weather. Self-study since I had to stop school, he said carefully. My father taught me early. Alvarez didn't push. Trauma has fingerprints she knew by heart. Fine, we'll get your statement. You want water? Food? Malik shook his head, then hesitated. Maybe water. Victor snapped fingers toward a server, tempered by a sorry smile. Please. A glass appeared, condensation purling. Malik took small measured sips, like an experiment that could explode if rushed. The story began bleeding across socials before the first cruiser left the block. Homeless youth halts poisoning at Maison Bernadotte. Clickbait layered over real peril. Alvarez ignored the digital storm and made her own. Who told you to do it, Caleb? She asked, voice quiet enough to feel like privacy. Morse's eyes went slick. I don't know his name. Try again, Alvarez said. Because a judge will ask. Morse's throat bobbed. 50 grand, he whispered. Said it had to look natural. Said Mr. Langford wouldn't see mourning. Victor's face didn't change much. Decades of IPOs and indictments had trained him well, but a filament inside him snapped. Who? He asked. No flourish. Morse swallowed. A man named... He cut off as Alvarez's partner approached, with a clear bag containing a prepaid phone, likely the thread that would lead to a spider. We'll trace it, Alvarez said. She looked at Victor. Do you have enemies? He exhaled. Competitors, litigants, men who think medicine is a ledger. He didn't say the name forming like frost in his chest. Statements unfurled, signatures scribbled, evidence catalogued. Malik's notebook lay open beside him. Pages a topography of reactions, buffers, tap water maps. A reporter tried to breach. Alvarez's glare sent him back behind the rope line. Victor watched Malik fidget with the laminated photo. Note the way his fingers softened at the edges of it. This wasn't a kid angling for brand deals. This was someone who'd learned to trust paper when people failed. Victor felt an old ache. Mentorship, thwarted by time, stir where he kept it safest. Hospital check, a paramedic suggested, eyeing Malik's tremor and pallor. Adrenaline crash can masquerade as worse. I'm fine, Malik lied. The medic's look said liar with kindness. Victor intervened. Humor us. Malik capitulated a centimeter. Vitals then. Cuff. Pulse ox. A penlight dance. He's riding the edge of hypoglycemia, the medic said. And he's soaked. Warm him. Feed him. Victor signaled again. A server nodded toward the kitchen. Bread and broth move quicker than bureaucracy. Alvarez returned, eyes brighter. The field kit's consistent. We're sending full tox. She turned to Malik. You named cyanide on scent. Not many can. He shrugged, the motion small. Genetics. Training. Alvarez studied him. From who? Malik's gaze slid to the photo. My father, Dr. Leonard Johnson. Victor's breath stalled. Leonard. Said like a bell rung in a sealed room. Memories swarmed. Late-night whiteboard sessions. Stubborn elegance in data. A laugh like tempered glass. Leonard taught you? Victor asked, voice softened by the unexpected past tense. Malik nodded, throat working. Before. He didn't finish. Alvarez didn't make him. The waiter's confession, once coaxed into daylight, grew bones. The man who'd recruited him had called from blocked numbers, paid in cash through a drop, pressured with gambling debt, and the threat of broken fingers. The instructions were theatrical. Special bottle, staged presentation, confidence all the way down. Alvarez collected details like beads. Anything distinct about his voice? Polished, Morse said. Smiled with words. Knew about wine. Victor didn't need adjectives. He needed a name, the one haunting his threats folder like a vulture. Graham Whitaker. Alvarez's radio crackled. Patrol had secured a back alley camera from a neighboring boutique. The restaurant system had indeed been accidentally offline. Pull it, she ordered. A minute later, a grainy clip showed a courier slipping in a bag near service trash, then ghosting away under an umbrella. The timestamp sang proximity to the poisoning. Chain him to the delivery, Alvarez told her tech. Victor felt the math assemble. Courier, bribed waiter, doctored bottle, public theater. Whitaker always loved optics. He also loved stealing what he couldn't invent. The storm eased to sullen drizzle. Alvarez holstered her pen and squared to Malik. You did a dangerous, good thing, she said. We'll need you for follow-up. Malik nodded, already retreating into the quiet posture of someone who expects to be dismissed. Victor refused the dismissal. I owe you my life, he said, not performative. Let me compensate. Malik's hand lifted, a stop sign threaded with pride. No, people help people. That isn't a transaction. The line hit Victor like clean alcohol on a wound. Pain, clarity, truth. He'd spent 40 years translating gratitude into wire transfers, friendly contracts, endowed chairs. Almost no one said no. Malik did. That refusal revealed an architecture of character Victor recognized and missed. He glanced at the notebook again and recognized something else. The notation's cadence. the way conclusions nested, the refusal to round inconvenient decimals, Leonard's imprint. "At least let me feed you," Victor said, "and get a doctor to look you over." Malik's stomach betrayed him with a low, dangerous growl. The medic chuckled. "That's consent." The kitchen rallied, sending out a bowl of consommé, a plate of buttered rice, bread still breathing heat. Malik ate carefully, a scientist titrating sugar back into blood. Victor took the stool beside him, asking questions that weren't traps. The answers sketched a life in negative space. Bridge lab, water maps, barter classes, a mother at a clinic 2 bus rides away. "Where'd you study?" Victor asked gently. Malik's mouth ticked. "Dad, and whatever the university throws away. I read a lot. It counts." "What was your father's field?" Victor already knew. He asked anyway, inviting the name into the air, letting it prove they occupied the same story. "Pharmaceutical chemistry," Malik said, voice snagging. "Cancer protocols." Victor's eyes went to some middle distance where whiteboards live. "He believed medicine should heal before it profits," Malik added, weary but fierce. The sentence unclipped a flock of memories so fast, Victor had to anchor a hand on the bar. He'd heard that exact phrasing in another decade, from another Johnson. Before he could follow the thought, a paramedic adjusted Malik's posture, and, in that fussing, a slim wallet slipped from Malik's inner pocket, skidding onto marble. Victor stooped automatically, habit and reflex, and froze. A business card, face up, had jetted free. Victor Langford, Chief Executive Officer, Langford Therapeutics. Malik's fingers snatched it with embarrassed speed. "I meant to return it," he said. "It fell when, earlier." Victor slid the card away, but the incident rewired an assumption. Malik wasn't collecting trophies. He was collecting truths, and keeping them safe. The card vanished back into Victor's jacket. Around them, the scene continued its controlled unwind. Bags sealed, tables wiped, diners released to late-night retellings. Alvarez compared notes with her tech, eyes bright on the hunt. Victor studied Malik. Not the spectacle, but the person who chose danger over disappearance, because knowledge carries moral mass. He'd spent years hiring for resume gloss and missing the rare signal, integrity welded to rigor. "You saved me," he said, simple. Malik shrugged like gravity. "You were in the blast radius. Someone had to move. The lab courier arrived for a rush chain to Tox. Alvarez took their info and turned to Victor and Malik. "You're both done here for now," she said. "We'll follow with statements, possible lineup, definitely more questions." She slid a card to Malik. "My direct line." He pocketed it with the care he'd give to a reagent. A reporter tried again. Victor's head of security, Bennett, wordlessly stepped between lenses and Malik's face. The kid didn't crave attention. He craved certainty. Victor understood. He craved that too. As the last fingerprint powder settled, Malik retreated to a corner chair, shoulders sagging. The adrenaline scaffolding had been dismantled. What remained was the ordinary architecture of fatigue and hunger. A journalist called out, "Hero!" Malik looked at the floor. He'd never liked nouns that closed doors. Victor approached, changed his angle, lowered his voice. "Thank you," he said, and meant the syllables. "I just didn't want you to die," Malik answered. The most precise sentence of the night. It landed heavier than any compliment possibly could. What Victor didn't know, what no one here could, was how tonight braided itself into a longer rope. The notebook's algorithms weren't just practice. They were footprints on a trail, and the methodology that had felt familiar wasn't coincidence. It was inheritance. Outside, the storm exhaled, leaving a wet city blinking in neon reflections. Inside, Victor watched Malik tuck the photo away with the card, and the card with the photo, objects magnetized by meaning. Gratitude shifted in Victor's hands into responsibility. He didn't intend to waste it. Then came the choreography everyone expects at scenes like this: insurance forms, corporate PR drafts, and the ceremonial reach for a wallet. Victor produced leather and habit in the same gesture. "Please," he said, not a command. "Let me." Malik lifted that same open palm. "No." The refusal wasn't performative. It was a thesis. "I'm not a contractor," he added softly. "I'm a person who saw harm and acted." Money had solved almost everything in Victor's orbit. Tonight, it ran up against a line he admired instantly. Dinner then, Victor tried again. Medical, a ride wherever you need. Malik hesitated, stomach making the argument for him with another low roll. Dinner, he conceded, unable to argue with biology. And I'll let the medic scold me. The paramedic reappeared with that professional, relieved smile. We love consent. Victor sat while Malik ate, asking questions in present tense. He didn't probe grief's locked drawer. He asked about water tables and buffer recipes, and listened like a man who knew discovery requires attention more than applause. Between bites, Malik's language slid into the cadences of a lab meeting. Control groups and false positives, sensor drift and calibration curves. Victor felt his own posture mirror it. Elbows in, focus narrowed, old muscles remembering what it is to chase a hypothesis instead of a quarterly target. Where did you learn to think like that? Victor asked. Malik's mouth edged toward a smile. My dad believed questions are a family heirloom. The room seemed to tilt, just slightly, toward a past Victor had walled off for survival. By the time paramedics cleared him, Malik was warmer, less pale, and visibly embarrassed by the fuss. At least let me get you a cab, Victor pressed. Or a car. Malik shook his head. 2 bus rides. You live far? Close enough to be useful. Alvarez approached with a final clipboard, thanking them both, professional gratitude that refused to gild. We'll be in touch, she told Malik. You can block my calls if we're annoying. I won't, he said. I like answers. Alvarez grinned. We'll get some. Victor watched as Malik zipped his thin jacket, tucked the notebook under his arm, and rose. He offered cash again, quieter, stripped of theater. You saved me. Please let me honor that. Malik's eyes met his, steady. Honor it by doing what you already do when no one's watching, he said. Fund the boring studies. Publish the null results. Tell the truth in court. Victor almost laughed because it was either that or remember the last time someone told him what ethics felt like from the inside. They walked toward the doors together, past the near-mended scene, past the staff who'd return tomorrow to a dining room that smelled faintly of bleach and fear. Rain had eased into a thin, reluctant mist. Malik hovered at the threshold, as if crossing it would return him to another gravity. Thank you for listening, he said. Victor took the gratitude like a directive. I'm not done, he said. Malik's mouth quirked. Me neither. He stepped into the drizzle, shoulders lifting to meet it, vanishing brick by brick. Victor stood framed by warmth and light, feeling the night air claw his lungs clean. He didn't feel victorious. He felt warned. 3 details snagged like hooks. First, the kid's chemistry wasn't hobby deep. It was scaffolding. He'd seen postdocs bluff. Malik didn't. Second, his crisis math, observe, hypothesize, test, act, rang with a rhythm Victor associated with a very small list of people. Third, timing. The attempt tonight wasn't random. It lined up too neatly with pressure campaigns that had been stalking Langford Therapeutics for months. He stepped aside, pulled his phone, and scrolled the evening's messages from Graham Whitaker. Their tone pleasant, their content predatory. Threats disguised as offers, offers disguised as inevitabilities. Hostile filings scheduled like holidays. 3 years of siphoned patents, ghosted formulations, flipping to shell companies with impossible speed. 3 years since, Victor shut the door on the memory like slamming a fume hood. His thumb paused over one thread, titled, with Whitaker's signature snide flourish, Your Friend Leonard's Legacy. He didn't open it. He didn't need to. Victor dialed Bennett. I want Whitaker shadowed, he said. Quietly. I want courier routes, shell companies, all of it. Bennett's yes was crisp. Victor ended the call and looked back into the dining room one last time. The mop tracks made pale arrows across the tile, pointing nowhere. He thought of Malik's notebook, of the laminated photo slipped inside, of a younger man standing between a toxin and a target because responsibility scales faster than fear. He'd met courage dressed in threadbare denim. He intended to remember. The ride home traced boulevards slick with reflected taillights. Victor's driver didn't try for small talk. Victor didn't like mirrors after nights like this. They insisted on inventory. He cataloged instead, facts, names, thresholds. He replayed the moment Malik said Leonard. and how the room's temperature changed for him alone. Years earlier, in a lab humming with centrifuges, Leonard Johnson had shown Victor how to test for cyanide with a rig improvised from nothing and a promise. Evidence, Leonard had said, is mercy for the innocent. Victor's building absorbed him. Quiet lobby, discreet security, the kind of place where disasters were someone else's headline. He rode the elevator with the same composure he'd worn at board meetings that felt like trials. When he reached his study, he didn't turn on all the lights. He woke only the desk lamp and opened a locked drawer where older ghosts lived. Inside, a photo of two men at a whiteboard, grinning, a copy of a patent that birthed a drug, a letter he'd never mailed. He set the photo down. Leonard's grin still looked like weather after a drought. Victor traced the edge of the frame, mind-yoking timelines the way Malik had yoked data. He reached for the letter and stopped. Instead, he opened his laptop and pulled up internal dashboards, compliance flags, lab protocols, supply chain anomalies. He wasn't going to sleep. He was going to work. Honor it by doing what you already do when no one's watching, Malik had said. Fine. Let's start watching closer than anyone expects. He drafted an email to audit, calling for a surprise sweep. Seller vendors, clinical partners, courier contracts. He CC'd legal with a question about emergency injunctions. He kept Whitaker's name off the subject lines, knowing how easily subjects leak. Then he typed another message and left it unsent. To Professor H. Kim. Subject, a student under a bridge. His hands hovered. He didn't send. Not yet. Protecting Malik meant moving without drawing light. He closed the lid and, for the first time since the glass, exhaled fully. Elsewhere, Malik stepped off a bus into wet air that smelled like pennies and ozone. He cut through an alley, past the mural of saints and scientists, to his tarped laboratory. He hung his jacket, wiped his hands, and checked the petri dishes he'd left incubating. Water from 3 blocks, a park fountain, a church tap. He logged turbidity, marked trends, fed the generator with a quarter tank of fuel he'd bartered for fixing a bike chain. He sat, finally, and let silence perform its triage. The card in his pocket, Alvarez, was a rectangle of potential. The card Victor reclaimed was a reminder that power has faces. He slid the laminated photo out, balanced it on the notebook. Hey, Dad, he said, feeling ridiculous and unalone. Want a small one tonight? He told the photo the facts, label angles, almond ghosts, men who confuse dinner with theater. He didn't mention the flash of kinship he felt near Victor, the eerie resonance of phrases he'd inherited, like heirlooms. Some things you test before you speak. He ate the rest of the bread, staving off the thin shake of depleted reserves, and turned to the scholarship essay, waiting like a stubborn reagent. He crossed out 3 metaphors, added 1 clean sentence. I map water because health shouldn't depend on zip code. His pencil paused over the line where he would mention Leonard without drowning the reader in grief. He wrote instead, My first teacher believed rigor is love with a lab coat. He sat back. It was almost true enough to live in daylight. Back at the precinct, Alvarez watched a grainy clip scrubbed and sharpened by a tech who loved his toys. The courier's gait angled aristocratic. Expensive shoes, umbrella held like an accessory rather than weather armor. She paused on a frame where the courier glanced up at nothing as if awaiting applause. Who are you? She murmured. Her phone chimed, field talks confirming cyanide with enough certainty to stiffen charges. She filed the alert, underdone and not yet, because prosecutions are marathons disguised as sprints. Victor's head of security dossier on Whitaker began to coalesce. Shell companies, interlocking boards, hospitality to certain judges, a magazine profile that oiled his villainy with charm. Bennett's notes bloomed along the margins. Source unverified. Follow lead. Confirm alibi. Victor circled 2 names, logistics firms Whitaker repeatedly used when he needed things to move without questions. He pressed fingers to his eyes until stars danced. Who paid you? Alvarez would ask soon enough. Victor had his answer, but he preferred evidence to instinct. That too he'd learned from Leonard. Morning would do what it always does. Arrive without asking whether you're ready. Victor's phone lay face down beside the letter he hadn't sent to Professor Kim. He drafted 1 more note, unsent, addressed to himself. Find Malik Johnson again. Not to reward, to understand. Under a bridge, Malik clicked off the LED strips one by one, letting darkness reclaim the lab in squares. He rolled into his sleeping bag, listening to the freeway's tidal thrum. Tomorrow he'd test, write, visit his mother, and keep his promise to keep asking. Victor's apartment carved a quiet out of the city's machinery. He stood at the window, watching drizzle turn to fog. Somewhere in the middle distance, he could almost hear Leonard's lecture cadence, the way he made danger sound like a solvable puzzle. He thumbed open Whitaker's latest message and finally read it. A velvet threat about legacy, valuation, inevitability. He deleted it unsatisfied. He speed-dialed Bennett. At dawn, he said, "We hunt." He didn't add for who. He didn't have to. The name lived in both men already. He hung up and scrolled to a contact he almost never used. Head of security, priority. Spin up a discrete task force, he said when the line clicked. Cross-reference courier footage with Whitaker's vendors. Pull permits, subpoenas ready, and Bennett? Yes, sir. Look back 3 years. Correlate the timeline with the night Leonard died. Victor ended the call and let the city fill the room with electric weather. He hadn't connected the name Malik spoke to the file he kept locked. Now the lock felt ceremonial. Bennett, I need a full background pull. Everything, Victor said, voice low and flinty. Name, Malik Johnson, roughly 19, unhoused, uncommon depth in chemistry, and... He hesitated, dropping to a near whisper. Cross-reference any tie to Dr. Leonard Johnson. The line went silent long enough to feel like a verdict. Sir, did you say Leonard Johnson? Bennett finally asked. You know the name, Victor replied. Dr. Leonard Johnson was your former research partner, Bennett said softly. He died 3 years ago in that lab blast, you remember? Victor's phone slipped, clattering across the rain-slick sidewalk like a gavel striking. The floodgates opened. Leonard, closest friend, fiercest collaborator, the architect of a cancer protocol, Whitaker was now circling like a hawk. Leonard, dead in a suspicious accident days before testifying about doctored trial data. Leonard, who had a family, a wife, a son who'd now be about 19. If Malik was Leonard's son, he wasn't a random kid. He was the living archive of a decade's most important breakthrough, a witness with proofs. Victor's thoughts sprinted ahead of the storm. If Malik was Leonard's boy, then that battered notebook was more than notes. It was provenance. And if Graham Whitaker learned the kid existed, hunting would begin. Victor snatched up his phone. Car now, he told his driver. We have to find him. But the city's arteries were already swallowing footprints. Malik had slipped back into the lattice of alleys and borrowed roofs, carrying knowledge sharp enough to topple empires or repair them, depending on who reached him first. The question didn't behave like a question, it behaved like a fuse. Which future would ignite? By dawn, the private investigator's report would land with 5 words that remapped Victor's world. Subject is Leonard Johnson's son. At 3 quite bien Rainikoam, rain still combing glass, Victor sat in his study with a manila folder couriered at speed. His hands shook, even though he already knew. Knowledge and seeing are different animals. He broke the seal anyway, prepared for the bite of paper-cut truth and unarguable timelines. First page, school transcripts. Honor roll every semester until 3 years ago. AP Chemistry, Calculus, Physics, Regional Science fair winner. Early admission to MIT stamped 2 months before catastrophe. Second page cut deeper. Medical bills, foreclosure filings, insurer denials, a death certificate. Leonard Everett Johnson, age 44, cause, accidental laboratory explosion. Victor's vision frayed at the edges. He heard again the midnight call. Leonard worrying about falsified datasets, promising to loop in regulators, 3 days before the blast erased witness and testimony alike in one plume. Leonard had phoned at midnight, voice steady and furious. The trial data didn't square. Someone had massaged outcomes. He wanted FDA eyes on the raw figures. 3 days later, a gas leak turned a lab into a mausoleum. Then the scaffolding of a family collapsed. Sarah's world narrowed to diagnoses and invoices. Their son left school to keep her afloat. Victor scanned the dossier like penance, collecting facts that felt like knives. He'd called it accident for 3 years because grief prefers euphemism. The next pages carried more gravity than ink should. Hospital admissions for Dr. Sarah Johnson, severe depression and anxiety, stacked like bricks, receipts for medications, notes from social workers about guardianship. The line that said Malik withdrew to provide care, dated weeks after the funeral. Victor swallowed hard, tasting metal. He'd been continents away, insulating his heart with board meetings and shareholder letters, while a child learned despair's chemistry. Responsibility, he realized, isn't a feeling, it's a ledger. His balance sheet showed a deficit he hated. The final section detonated the room. Monthly transfers, $4,847 to Riverside Behavioral Health, covering Sarah's full treatment cost for 36 months, routed through the Langford Foundation. The charity Victor created to support families of scientists lost in the line of discovery had been paying every bill. Malik had never known. Victor sat very still while shame mapped his ribs. He'd asked after the family years ago and been told they moved in with relatives. He approved anonymous assistance, convinced he'd done enough. He'd been catastrophically wrong. Victor's phone buzzed again. Bennett. Found additional material. You'll want eyes on this now. Another courier, another folder, heavier, like it knew it carried consequence. Inside, security footage from the night Leonard died, shadowed figures slipping into the lab after hours, corporate emails jawing about the Johnson problem, wire transfers between Whitaker fronts and ghost corporations. Worst of all, audio of Graham Whitaker musing about permanently preventing Leonard from poisoning the brand. Accident was a fairy tale sung over a crime scene. Leonard hadn't failed. He'd been erased. The cure Whitaker wanted wasn't Whitaker's. It was Leonard's work, stolen from a dead man's cooling hands. Patents that had swum to rival portfolios were looted goods, laundered through paperwork. And Malik, the hungry, brilliant 19-year-old, was the last living witness to methodologies, raw notebooks, null results, the scaffolding beneath the breakthrough. If Whitaker sniffed out the connection, the kid's life would shrink to a target. Tonight's attempted poisoning, Victor realized, wasn't strictly about a takeover. It was preemptive damage control. Silence one witness, frighten the rest. Victor's blood ran cold. Malik had lived ghost quiet for 3 years, invisible to corporate hounds. But his sprint into a gilded dining room had turned invisibility into headline. Cameras adored him. Algorithms amplified him. Whitaker's people would connect dots faster than ethics allowed. By saving Victor, Malik might have signed his own warrant. Victor dialed. Bennett, I want a protective detail now. Find him, move him somewhere safe. Full counter-surveillance. If Whitaker's crew reaches that boy before we do, I'll consider us derelict. Understood? Understood, Bennett said. Even as he issued the order, Victor tasted defeat. Social feeds were detonating. Homeless teen saves pharma CEO. Angles multiplied, each adding daylight where Malik had survived on shadow. Whitaker's analytics teams would already be parsing frames, matching gaits, harvesting metadata down to the scuff pattern on Malik's shoes. The cruel arithmetic was simple. A 19-year-old with his father's rigor and his father's ethics threatened a billion-dollar theft. Victor pressed his palms flat on the desk and chose velocity. Go, he told himself. Find him faster. The dossier's addendum tabbed the part that felt like a prayer answered and an indictment delivered. Malik's notebook, photographed during evidence intake, contained fragments of Leonard's old protocols, cross-referenced with water assays, field notes, buffer recipes. Provenance hid in the margins. Leonard's teaching voice visible in the architecture of Malik's handwriting. The missing piece wasn't missing. It had sheltered under a bridge. Victor pictured the kid cup-handing soup between calibrations, protecting pages the way other people protect heirlooms. What looked like poverty was discipline in armor. What came next had to be precise. If Victor moved like a CEO, Whitaker would counter as a predator. If he moved like a scientist, Whitaker might underestimate time's knife edge. He needed both personas. The man who could marshal resources with a text, and the man who could whisper to a frightened 19-year-old in a library. He texted Bennett again. Check transit cams, shelters, libraries opening at dawn. Malik wouldn't hide in the obvious. He'd thread himself into routine. He'll be where the knowledge is, Victor murmured. The city turned gray at the edges, rain easing into mist. Bennett's update hit like a clean lab result. Target located at Central Library, 6:07 a.m. Science stacks. Victor's heart lifted and clenched in the same beat. Of course. While assassins combed alleys, a scientist went where the journals live. Victor grabbed his coat and the folder, and left the elevator before it fully opened. Hold Whitaker at arm's length, he told Bennett. I need 90 minutes. Keep him deaf and blind if you can. Copy, Bennett said. Victor found Malik in the chemistry section, fortress of textbooks stacked by priority, notes sorted like a chromatography column. Even exhausted, wearing yesterday's storm as a second skin, the kid's workspace radiated the kind of order that happens when survival marries rigor. Malik, Victor said softly, careful not to startle prey wired for flight. The young man looked up, and Victor watched recognition form. First the man, then the implication. You're in danger, Victor whispered. The man who tried to kill me will pivot to you next. Malik closed his book with deliberate calm, aligning its spine like a measurement. Because I saw too much, he said, and because of who my father was. Victor sat, lowering his voice. Your father was Dr. Leonard Johnson, my partner, my closest friend. He didn't die in an accident. The words struck like physics. Shock, hope, fury, grief flew across Malik's face, landing finally on something Victor recognized as resolve. You knew him. I did, Victor said. I worked with him. I failed him. And I failed you. For 20 minutes, Victor laid out the chain, manipulated data, Leonard's planned testimony, a suspicious explosion, patent thefts moving like money through shells, and the anonymous payments covering Sarah's care, made through Victor's foundation, believing the family was safe, never knowing a teenager slept under concrete sky. Your mother is receiving the best care, Victor finished. She's safe. She's been asking for you. Malik's hands trembled. She's okay? Better, Victor said. Stabilized. The doctors say she's ready for supervised visits. Something in Malik's chest finally unlatched. Tears he'd quarantined since the blast found their jurisdiction. He scrubbed them away, embarrassed, then let them fall anyway because chemistry respects pressure differentials. Victor wasn't finished. Malik, I want to offer you something that sounds impossible and is merely overdue, he said. A full ride to MIT, tuition, housing, living stipend. A research post at Langford Therapeutics working on your father's protocol, your mother's care, fully covered for life, and more. I want a partnership to finish what Leonard started, the work Whitaker tried to bury. Malik stared, as if trying to decide whether the man in front of him was dangerous or a lifeline. His voice, when it came, threaded quietly through the stacks. Why me? You don't know me. I know enough, Victor said. You saved my life with knowledge your father taught you. You refused cash you needed because conscience outranked hunger. You've protected his notebook like scripture. And I know Leonard. He raised you to ask the hardest questions. Victor slid over an old photo. Leonard, Sarah, Victor, grinning. My father never mentioned you, Malik said, eyes drinking the image. He was protecting you, Victor answered. He knew the research drew predators. He kept family and lab in different orbits. It didn't save him. But it kept you off Whitaker's radar, until last night. Malik looked up, jaw set. If I say yes, then you stop being prey and start being plaintiff, Victor said. Whitaker will hunt harder, but this time you'll have federal protection, counsel, and me doing what I should have done 3 years ago. Stand up. Silence stretched, a lab timer no one had set ticking in both their chests. Leonard's therapy, Malik asked. If we finish it, how many lives? Victor answered carefully. Conservative modeling, hundreds of thousands in the first decade, likely more. And my mom? The best care money and decency can provide. Malik closed his eyes, and Victor could almost feel the balance beam. Safety versus purpose, shadow versus truth. He opened them changed, his father's seriousness in his gaze. With knowledge comes responsibility, he said. I'll do it. Or not for money, Malik continued, voice gaining steel. And not for a headline, because the world deserves what my father died trying to deliver. Hope bloomed in Victor, like something he hadn't allowed in years. They would finish Leonard's work and make the thieves answer. The race against Whitaker didn't stop because they'd chosen a direction. It accelerated. We move now, Victor said. Quietly. Bennett has a team outside. Malik nodded. He slid the notebook into his pack, the photo into his wallet, and stood. The library's fluorescent hum felt suddenly conspiratorial. Outside, a black sedan idled like a promise. Bennett, a tall, middle-aged man with the posture of a retired linebacker, met them at the doors. "We've got a clean route," he said. "Countertail looks empty, but feeds suggest Whitaker's crawlers are awake." Malik scanned faces out of reflex, reading posture, hand position, eyes. "He'll send pros," Victor said. "But pros underestimate curiosity. Yours kept you alive." Malik half smiled. "Curiosity and luck." "We'll trade luck for layers of security," Bennett grunted. They slid into the car. Bennett outlined the plan. Safe house with rotating vehicles, decoys, burner phones, a legal team already sketching protective filings. Victor texted Alvarez, the detective who now had a federal task force's attention, flagging new evidence streams without poisoning the chain. Malik watched the city stream past like a chromatogram, peaks and valleys of human concentration. "One stop first," Victor said. Malik tensed. Bennett shook his head. "Not risky," he promised. "Necessary." The sedan turned toward Riverside, where a woman with steady eyes waited. Riverside's intake desk ran on bureaucracy and kindness. Victor spoke to administrators. Bennett swept corridors with a gaze like a Geiger counter. Malik stood just inside the visitation room, hands unsteady. Then the door opened, and his mother was there. Thinner, yes, but present in a way that punched breath from him. "Malik," she said, his name breaking into syllables of relief. He crossed the room in 2 strides. They held so long, the nurse checked the clock and smiled. "I thought," she began. "Me too," he whispered. Victor stayed outside that moment, choosing to be furniture. When Sarah finally looked over Malik's shoulder, she recognized Victor with a startle that turned into something complicated, gratitude braided to grief. "You worked with Leonard," she said. "Yes," Victor replied, voice careful. "And I failed you both. I'm sorry." She studied him like data. "Fixing it will be better than apologizing," she said gently. "We intend to," Victor promised. Malik wiped his eyes, and with a small, disbelieving smile, said, "Mom, they want to finish Dad's work." Sarah's gaze sharpened. "Safer this time," she said. "With lawyers who like sunlight." Victor nodded. "And with you, when you're ready." Her mouth twitched in a scientist's smile. "Give me 2 months and a whiteboard." They laughed, a sound that belonged in another decade. And then security realities pressed in. Bennett tapped his watch. "We need to move." Malik squeezed his mother's hands. "I'll be back soon," he said. "With guards and flowers." She squeezed back. "Bring data," she replied. It landed exactly where both men lived. For the next 6 hours, movement replaced narrative. Safe house, legal strategy, encrypted drives, sworn statements for Alvarez's team. Victor's crisis unit built a scaffolding around Malik's life. New phone, cover story, code names silly enough to remember. Bennett plotted Whitaker's known assets across the city like an infection map. "He buys logistics," Bennett said. "Couriers, storage, trucking. That's where he hides the switches." Victor forwarded that to Alvarez, who answered with one word, "Noted." It meant subpoenas. It also meant a countdown had started. By evening, the foundation paperwork had a new name, the Langford Johnson Research Foundation. Its charter was simple enough to survive courts, complete Leonard's protocol, publish results, price to access. A press team drafted a statement with no theatrics, facts like stones. Victor scheduled a quiet campus meeting with Professor Hannah Kim, the same scholar who'd once praised Malik's water quality maps on a sidewalk. The ask, admit a 19-year-old with graduate-level instincts, and cloak him long enough for the world's loudest parts to exhaust themselves. Professor Kim read the packet like oxygen, then looked at Malik over her glasses. "You built a lab under an overpass," she said. "We can provide better ventilation." Malik's mouth twitched. "And fewer raccoons," he added. She laughed once, then sobered. "You're stepping into a storm. We'll make sure you have a roof, a cohort, and boring meetings to complain about." Boring sounded like paradise. Victor signed documents. Kim countersigned. The machine that turns promise into platform word awake, not flashy, but unstoppable. A week bled into a month, and the work consumed fear the way a proper project does. Malik learned new machines by listening to their hum. He slept in a real bed that felt like cheating and woke to coffee that tasted like permission. Sarah progressed, smiling more and flinching less. Alvarez's task force raided a logistics hub. Courts stamped warrants with a speed unusual in white-collar cases. Whitaker responded with lawyers and leak campaigns. Data, however, doesn't care about PR. It cares about replication and truth. One late night, Malik stood in the lab Victor had refitted, fingers on glassware his father would have loved. Victor watched without intruding. He used to say protocols are love letters to future scientists, Malik murmured. Clear writing saves lives. Victor nodded, throat tight. He said the same to me. The moment hung, a bridge between decades. We'll finish it, Victor said. Then we'll name the boring parts after him. The world ignores the boring parts. That's where ethics live. Malik smiled. He'd like that. The filing against Whitaker hit federal dockets like thunder. Conspiracy, fraud, obstruction, homicide. Alvarez's evidence map read like a novel with footnotes. Security footage, courier manifests, bank trails, recovered drafts of forged reports, and, most damning, audio of Whitaker instructing an intermediary to put Johnson in the ground, if necessary. Whitaker feigned outrage on financial news shows. Stock tickers dipped and stuttered. Victor ignored the noise. He took Malik to see Sarah again, this time bringing a sheaf of preliminary results. Bring data, she'd said. He did. 2 months later, Sarah walked into a conference room and claimed a whiteboard like a returned monarch. She read the team's latest pass, then circled, crossed, reordered. Leonard always worried about this off-target cascade, she said. So do I. Malik watched, dazzled. Victor's heart stuttered with gratitude and ghost ache. Together, mother and son adjusted a variable that had been a pebble in Leonard's shoe. The model responded like a patient relaxing. Sometimes progress is a door that was always there, waiting for the right key. Some nights were less cinematic. Bad pizza, failing assays, tempers that needed apologies. Malik learned the art of pausing before a snap. Victor learned to sit and let younger brilliance drive. Sarah learned laughter again, small and fierce. Professor Kim built a firewall around Malik's classes, routing attention through bureaucratic mazes until prying eyes got bored. Bennett, infuriatingly invisible, kept Whitaker's contractors 2 steps behind. They hate not knowing where you sleep, he told Malik. I like them hating, Malik said. It means we're alive. When the first major milestone hit, a Phase 2 outcome exceeding projections, nobody popped champagne. They ate oranges over the sink. Victor drafted language so clean, even cynics might trust it. We will publish raw and processed data simultaneously. The Foundation's statement read, we will price at cost plus transparent margin. We will not litigate patience. Reporters expected polish. They got policy. The market frowned. Patients waited. Labs read the supplement and nodded. It felt like scientists talking to scientists, not executives talking to advertising. The Department of Justice pressed charges. Whitaker's inner circle began to flip. One courier turned state's witness, describing the night of the restaurant plot with clinical detail that made Victor sweat in an air-conditioned room. A judge denied bail. Whitaker's scowl hit every business section in the world. Victor didn't gloat. He called Sarah instead. We're closer, he said. Closer isn't finished, she replied, practical as ever. Back to work. They went back, because the best revenge is not prison. It's patients who live long enough to garden. Conservative estimate, Malik asked again 6 months later, eyes on a data set that glowed like sunrise. We were too conservative, Victor answered, half laughing, half crying. The protocol's refinement, Sarah's hand, Malik's audacity, Leonard's bones, had pushed efficacy into a range that if Phase 3 held, would redraw oncology. They scheduled the trial with sober joy. In parallel, they architected manufacturing that didn't treat scarcity as a branding strategy. We are not making a luxury item, Victor said in a memo. We are making breathing room. Phase the third wasn't a montage. It was a gauntlet, boring forms, unexpected supply hiccups, human variables. But the numbers kept refusing to be sad. When the interim analysis cleared every bar, Sarah stood at a lectern and made an announcement that understatement could barely hold. 91% response rate, she said. My husband's protocol, strengthened by our son's innovations, is the most significant advance since mid-century chemotherapies. The room erupted, but the real noise happened later in hallways where strangers hugged and didn't explain. The photograph that traveled fastest wasn't the conference stage. It was quieter. Malik, 19, standing beside Sarah on an MIT dais as the institute awarded Leonard a posthumous degree in humanitarian science. Malik wore his father's lab coat, recut to fit. Sarah pinned an MIT research badge on his chest, same badge Leonard once wore. The caption that landed best came from a student newspaper. A family returns to the lab. The Langford Johnson Foundation opened 2 new wings. A third existed mostly as a dream with blueprints. Hawthorne, Whitaker, fell in weeks, the legal equivalent of a controlled demolition. Indictments numbered like pages. 17 executives faced federal charges. The patents laundered through shells were repatriated to the Johnson estate, placed in a trust with governance rules so strict even future Victor couldn't bully them. Media tried to make Victor a savior. He kept pointing at Sarah's whiteboard and Malik's bench. It's infrastructure, he said. I'm just pouring concrete. Alvarez, asked for comment, said, the evidence carried its own weight. It sounded like justice behaving properly. Real victory lives outside headlines. In oncology wards, people scheduled for goodbye parties canceled them. Children went home with backpacks instead of discharge binders. Grandparents learned the names of new grandchildren. The Johnson Protocol entered production at cost through a mesh of humanitarian partnerships. Pharmas that had fed on marginal, side-effect-heavy treatments faced a new competitor, a therapy designed to heal before it billed. Debate erupted about corporate duty, profits stumbled and recalibrated. Someone asked Victor if he was anti-business. I'm anti-extortion, he said. A 60-minute special knotted it together. The fraud, the murder, the theft, the return. Medical journals ran retrospectives on accidents that looked different under fresh light. Congress held hearings that didn't bore. Whistleblower protections gained teeth in a bill dubbed the Johnson Act, funding legal support and safe harbor grants for researchers reporting manipulation. In classrooms, curricula grew a new unit about ethics as method, not decoration. The Foundation's scholarship arm launched at velocity. Not just money, but housing, mentors, healthcare, and the promise of belonging. 49 candidates this cycle, Professor Kim, now program director, reported. We found 20 living on couches, 9 in cars, 3 under bridges. 1, Mason Carter, 16, had built radios from salvage in a tunnel. Another, Sophia Ruiz, 18, engineered a water purifier with construction site discard. Malik designed bright yellow mobile labs that rolled science into neighborhoods where resource usually meant luck. Kids who'd never touched a microscope stained slides and gasped. Science isn't somewhere else, Malik told them. It's a habit you practice. It's how you help. The Johnson Act did more than shield truth-tellers. It changed the conversation. Boards asked different questions. Trial registries opened more windows. A culture that once treated dissent like treason started treating it like quality control. The documentary, The Notebook, A Scientist's Legacy, took 3 Emmys and unlocked dinner table talks about ownership and mercy. None of that bought back time, but it bought direction. The Foundation's inbox filled with stories of small heroism, bus drivers spotting chemical spills, baristas noticing tampered labels, neighbors choosing intervention over indifference. The impact that mattered most wasn't trending. It lived in shelters where tutors arrived with oscilloscopes, in libraries with extra outlets, in clinics where new interns carried clipboards and old grief. 100, then 1,000 young people looked at Malik and saw a map. If a kid who slept beside a freeway can pull a man back from poison, one teen wrote, maybe I can pull my city back from apathy. Momentum replaced spectacle. In that momentum, Victor found a kind of prayer he could finally stand. 2 years later, Malik wasn't the homeless kid anymore. At 21, he was MIT's youngest junior researcher, co-directing the Langford Johnson Foundation, named on 3 patents that resisted greed by design. Sarah returned to bench leadership, specializing in rare diseases. The family reconstructed itself, not as if nothing had happened, but as if everything had mattered. On a Tuesday morning, Malik skimmed grant proposals in the student cafe when an old pattern flashed. A nervous maintenance man, a wrong brand coffee, a glance too hungry toward the exit. The cup's temperature was off by a margin that only obsession notices. Under the cafe's roast, a faint ghost, bitter almonds. Malik didn't weigh drama against risk. He said, "Emma, don't drink that." Across 3 tables, voice steady as lab glass. The man bolted, campus security, better trained by a world that had watched, intercepted at the door. Field tests came back ugly. Later, under lights, the would-be assassin confessed to working for a remnant of Whitaker's network, still stupid enough to try copy-pasting murder. Emma, bright first-year chemistry, shook in the aftermath, then steeled. "How did you know?" she asked. "Pattern recognition," Malik said, smiling like a man who hears a father in his head. "And someone once told me, with knowledge comes responsibility." The police packed evidence. Malik walked Emma to the new Michael Leonard Johnson Memorial Laboratory, the plaque bearing a promise etched in brass. Knowledge is power. Wisdom is choosing when to act. Victor joined them, easing into the chair he favored, like a ritual that kept him honest. "Still saving lives," Victor said, warmth wrapped around worry. "Just practicing," Malik answered. He pointed to a framed photo, Sarah, Leonard, Victor, 5 years younger, and a newer one, Malik receiving a research award with Sarah beaming like sunrise. "He'd be proud," Victor said quietly, the sentence still cutting. "I hope he's amused," Malik replied. "He always liked it when I surprised him." They sat a moment, listening to centrifuges spin comfortingly. Outside, students laughed, a sound that never stops meaning civilization. Inside, applications stacked like future. "Once." 47 new scholarship candidates, Malik said, tapping the pile. Kids people ignored. Kids who troubleshoot poverty like a broken circuit. Victor remembered a drenched 19-year-old refusing cash. "Any bridge-born chemists this time?" "3, Malik said, grinning. "One is 15. She built a purifier from PVC and crushed charcoal in an empty lot." Sarah would love her, Victor thought. He felt the ache of time and the relief of purpose coexisting like isotopes you learn to measure. "Bring her in," Victor said. "Let's give boredom and safety." Evening settled over campus, turning glass walls into lanterns. Work wasn't finished. Work doesn't finish. There would be another someone in need, another odds-stacked crisis, another choice between bravery and convenience. They welcomed that. Victor trailed his fingers over the brass motto. Malik gathered the applications like a liturgy. If heroism had a brand, they ignored it. Their practice was smaller, more demanding. Show up, test, publish, protect. Somewhere, a young scientist hunched over a problem no one had learned to name yet. "How many Maliks are walking past you, invisible because your attention is busy?" Professor Kim asked a crowd at a foundation event, and the question traveled. In laundromats, bus depots, late-shift break rooms, people started looking up differently. The story had started with catastrophe, run on outrage, and matured into habit. Victor, older and finally comfortable with the word legacy, watched it replicate. "It's a good virus," Sarah joked once, "benign and highly contagious." Malik pretended to hate the metaphor, then used it in a grant. The day-to-day was less cinematic: grant panels, quality checks, meetings with community partners that smelled like coffee and dust. The Johnson Act survived its first court challenge. A circuit judge called it scaffolding for scientific honesty. Alvarez, now leading a federal unit, sent a postcard. "Keep publishing raw. It makes my job easier." Whitaker served a sentence that turned charm into ash. Interviewers kept asking Victor if revenge felt sweet. He said, "Victory tasted like oranges over a sink the night we hit 91%. A new documentary crew pitched a sequel. Malik declined. "Tell someone else's origin," he said, "preferably one that doesn't start with murder." Instead, the foundation funded student filmmakers to document community labs blooming under freeway flyovers, in church basements, in repurposed storefronts. The point wasn't to make Malik a statue. It was to make Malik ordinary. Ordinary courage, ordinary rigor, ordinary refusal to look away. If Ordinary could change oncology, perhaps Ordinary could rewire 10 other broken systems hiding in plain sight. 2 summers later, Malik taught a course nobody knew they needed: failure analysis for civilians. The syllabus: how to read graphs without lying to yourself, how to spot tampered seals, how to escalate without martyrdom. Emma, now a junior working part-time in Sarah's lab, guest lectured on scent thresholds and not panicking. Victor sat in the back occasionally, pretending to check email while memorizing the way young minds turn understanding into muscle. After class, he would walk the campus and thank whatever physics allowed late starts. A Tuesday, again, Malik sat in the cafe, reviewing microgrant proposals. $1,500 for sensors here, $2,000 for pipettes there, when he noticed a custodian subtly planting a tube near a vent. He rose with a calm that hid alarm. "Maintenance schedule changed?" he asked pleasantly. The man blinked, recalculating, and backed toward the hall. Malik pressed a discreet alert. Security arrived, gentler than the world used to be. The tube proved harmless, a tester's prank gone dumb. But the process worked. Practice doesn't eliminate danger, it reduces drama. Later, in the lab that bore his father's name, Malik let fatigue wash over him the way a tide washes a pier. Loud, temporary. Victor walked in, carrying tea like a peace offering. "You look like the end of a marathon," he said. "Feels more like a relay," Malik replied. "I run my leg, somebody else takes the baton." Victor smiled. Leonard would have called it a cascade, one reaction feeding another. Malik grinned. "He also would have told me to sleep." Sarah, passing, added, "He absolutely would." News cycles moved on, as they always do. Their work didn't. The Foundation released another tranche of raw data. Skeptical labs replicated and, annoyingly to detractors, confirmed. Hospitals adopted new protocols. Insurance models grudgingly adapted. A quiet rumor started that emergency rooms smelled faintly less like despair. Malik liked that rumor. He liked better the stories that didn't mention him. A 6th grader discovering bacteria on a playground drinking fountain. A freight manager refusing a suspicious shipment. A diner insisting a bottle be opened at the table. "Is this what you imagined?" Victor asked one night as they walked past a campus mural of Leonard, more lines than likeness, but somehow accurate. "No," Malik said. "I imagined paperwork and maybe a nap." They laughed. "Honestly," he added, "I imagined doing the right thing and being punished for it." Victor nodded. "Sometimes you are, but sometimes you get oranges and a whiteboard and 1,000 small betterments." They stood hands in pockets, comfortable with unfinished business. The mural's paint glowed streetlight gold and looked like hope. Emma stopped by with a stack of scholarship essays. "You want the impossible pile?" she asked Malik. "Always," he said. "Impossible just means nobody's explained it yet." Victor read over shoulders, catching phrases that felt like echoes. Water tables, caregiver math, bus schedules, improvisation as method. "We should add more mentors," he said. "People who understand both survival and spectroscopy." Malik pointed to a list. "Already recruiting." Sarah peeked in, eyeing the room with the wary pride of someone who knows joy and risk cohabitate. "Still tallying wins?" Victor asked later, half teasing. Malik shook his head. "I'm tallying processes. Wins follow." He gestured toward the entrance plaque. "Knowledge is power. Wisdom is choosing when to act." Victor touched the brass. "You know, when we hung that, I worried it was performative." Malik snorted. "You hung it at eye level for a reason. It ambushes people." They watched a freshman pause to read it, mouth the words, and nod like an oath. Sometimes you change the world with typography and timing. A donor asked Victor why the Foundation insisted on at-cost pricing. "Because we're not building scarcity theater," he said. "We're building access." The donor blinked, unused to bluntness paired with spreadsheets. Later, Victor found Malik labeling sample racks with a neatness that would have pleased Leonard. "You think we can keep this culture?" Victor asked. Malik capped a pen. "Only if we keep teaching it. Culture decays unless maintained." Sarah overheard and added, "and measured." They laughed. She meant it. They would build a dashboard for decency. Night settled. and with it, the familiar hum of machines, doing what they were designed to do. Victor and Malik reviewed an ops plan for rolling the mobile labs into 3 new cities. "We'll need local partners who know which doors won't open and which ones need a different knock," Malik said. "We'll send alumni," Victor replied. "Kids who remember sleeping in their shoes. They'll know the knock. It felt like an algorithm you feed, and it feeds you back. Compassion, competence, repeat until the graph bends." "Any word from Alvarez?" Malik asked, booting a file. "She sent a photo of a closed case box and a cupcake," Victor said. "I think that's federal for celebration." Malik laughed, warmth loosening the day's knots. "Tell her thanks for keeping the lights honest." Victor nodded. He still didn't like the word hero. He did like crew. Crew implied shared load, rotating roles, mutual rescue. Crew meant nobody gets left in the alley because the plan didn't include contingency for kids under bridges with microscopes. They locked the lab and stepped into a corridor smelling faintly of ethanol and institutional carpet. "There'll be another crisis," Victor said. "Not grim, just mathematical." "Good," Malik answered. "We'll need a fresh test of our systems." He grinned sideways. "Also, we learn best under pressure." Victor groaned. "Don't quote Leonard at me." "I'd never," Malik said, quoting perfectly. Their footsteps echoed companionably. Outside, the city carried on. Sirens, laughter, frying onions, ordinary symphony. Ordinary was the dream. Ordinary with safety, with work, with problems you could name. Sometimes the smallest voice carries the instruction manual. A barista flags a mismatch. A neighbor calls a patrol. A teenager refuses silence. The Langford Johnson story started with tragedy, then went loud, then got methodical. That's the part Malik loved. Method turning grief into governance. "People think you need capes," Emma joked once during office hours. "You need calendars and checklists." Malik pointed at her clipboard. "And pens that don't die." They both laughed, then returned to reviewing mini-grants that would make 10 very specific miracles possible. Here's the part that matters most. You don't need a PhD to keep someone breathing. You don't need wealth or a title. You need attention married to action. You need the courage to be inconvenient. Wisdom doesn't care about resumes. It cares about choices. Victor learned that from a 19-year-old who refused cash. Malik learned it from a father who insisted science is love with a hypothesis. Sarah learned it by surviving. They would keep teaching it until the lesson didn't feel like news anymore. So ask yourself, when did you last listen to someone the world sorted into background noise? When did you push pause on your certainty and borrow theirs? When did you risk looking foolish to keep someone else from getting hurt? Tell someone that story. Make them braver. If this reminded you the smallest skill can be a lifeline, hold on to that feeling. Share it, mentor someone, fund a kit, vote for oversight. The next Leonard, the next Malik, is already taking notes in your neighborhood. And if you needed a nudge, here it is, pay attention. That man about to pour, that label turned just so, that scent that doesn't belong. Be the person who says, stop. You don't have to be first author on a paper to write a better ending. You just have to show up when it counts. Somewhere out there, another young scientist is soldering hope out of scrap and stubbornness. Be the one who believes in them early. You never know. You might be the key to their tomorrow. When the soaked kid yelled, stop, he didn't chase glory. He honored duty. Many of us past 65 know that kind of duty. The instinct to protect, the habit of checking labels twice, the courage to speak up even when it's awkward. Malik's nose caught bitter almonds. His heart caught responsibility. That moment reminds us our lifetime of vigilance still matters. Steady eyes, steady hands, saving a life between dinner courses and the next heartbeat. Friends, what would you have done in Malik's shoes? Stay quiet to avoid trouble or shout, stop, to protect a stranger? Have you ever trusted your instincts and prevented harm, even something small like catching a bad label or a suspicious smell? Share your story below. If this lesson resonated, please like the video, subscribe to my YouTube channel, and comment so more people, especially our peers, can learn practical, life-saving habits from real-world moments.